Purpose? What purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 250 to direct the Joint Committee on the Library to procure a statue of Benjamin Franklin for placement in the Capitol.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 250, a bill to direct the Joint Committee on the Library to procure a statue of Benjamin Franklin for placement in the Capitol.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Morell, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include additional material of the bill.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, I bring forward 2 bills. Our nation faces major challenges and concerns, and this body continues to work on those. While we do that, these bills are simple, non-controversial, and do require legislative action to take effect. I rise today to urge my colleagues to support H.R. 250 to direct the Joint Committee on the Library to procure a statue of Benjamin Franklin for placement in the Capitol. The nonpartisan legislation will allow Congress to place a statue of Benjamin Franklin in the Capitol. The legislation will require that not later than 2 years after enactment, the Joint Committee on the Library shall enter into an agreement to obtain a statue of Benjamin Franklin. It will also be required that the statue be placed in a publicly accessible permanent location no later than December 31, 2026. I thank Reps. Houlihan and Fitzpatrick and their 72 additional co-sponsors for bringing this legislation forward. And I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of H.R. 250, and I yield back. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume, and I want to begin by thanking my dear friend and colleague, the chair of the Committee on House Administration, for bringing these bills to the floor and for always his partnership and all the great cooperation that we enjoy. And I rise today in support of H.R. 250. The bipartisan legislation would direct the Joint Committee on the Library, as Mr. Stile said, to procure a statue of Benjamin Franklin for placement in the Capitol to be observed by all those blessed to come and tour the United States Capitol. As my colleague and friend, the sponsor of this bill, along with Mr. Fitzpatrick, Representative Chrissy Houlihan, has observed, and I'm quite certain will observe once again in just a few moments, while there are references to Benjamin Franklin across the Capitol and a statue tucked away in a back hallway, it's black when there's no lights on, there is no statue of one of the most important founding fathers accessible to the millions of visitors who have the privilege of touring the Capitol each year. And this legislation would change that, honoring one of the greatest minds and patriots in American history. Benjamin Franklin was a statesman, a diplomat, scientist, inventor, political philosopher, and businessman. His groundbreaking experiments pushed forward scientific understanding. His role as the first Postmaster General created the foundation of our modern mail system, and he was resolutely committed to freeing the colonies from British rule. He helped draft both the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution, and he negotiated the treaty that ended the Revolutionary War. His genius has shaped our nation in innumerable ways, and he deserves to be prominently displayed and honored in the United States Capitol. I look forward to working with the Joint Committee on the Library to obtain a statue of Benjamin Franklin and urge my colleagues to support this measure. And with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, my friend and colleague, Mr. Fitzpatrick, to speak on the bill.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My friend from Wisconsin, Representative Stile. To my friend and colleague from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan, this is really the product of her hard work. I was proud to partner with her and accept that invitation. And Representative Houlihan, if Ben Franklin were here today, he'd give you a big hug of gratitude for finally recognizing him. Madam Speaker, I rise today in resolute support of H.R. 250, the Benjamin Franklin Statute Replacement Act. Alongside of my friend and colleague from Pennsylvania, Congresswoman Houlihan, I am proud to advance this effort to enshrine one of America's most extraordinary minds and consequential patriots in the heart of our nation's capital. Madam Speaker, few figures in our history so fully embody the spirit of American ingenuity, perseverance, and democratic virtue as Benjamin Franklin, a statesman whose diplomacy secured our independence, a philosopher whose wisdom guided our early republic, and an inventor whose genius advanced mankind. More than a son of Pennsylvania, Ben Franklin was and remains a towering architect of the American experiment, a testament to what is possible when vision and virtue work in concert with one another. As we approach the 250th anniversary of our great nation, it is both fitting and necessary that Benjamin Franklin take his rightful place amongst the great figures enshrined in this amazing place. To commemorate this milestone without visibly honoring one of its chief architects would be to overlook the very ideals that built our great republic. Ben Franklin lived his life with a deliberate sense of purpose, beginning each day by asking, "What good shall I do on this day?" And by ending every evening in reflection, "What good have I done today?" Madam Speaker, that is not just a measure of a life well lived, it's a measure of leadership, of duty, and of a nation that strives always to be better than it was the day before. Let us take up that challenge, not merely in words, but in action. Let us ensure Ben Franklin's presence in these halls serves as a constant reminder that our charge is not to serve ourselves, but to serve a greater good. And at the close of each day, may we too be able to answer that question with certainty, having served with purpose, led with integrity, and upheld the ideals that Ben Franklin and our founders entrusted to us. With that, I yield the balance of my time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do want to yield to my dear friend, the person who has really led this effort, my dear friend from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan, for 4 minutes.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, of course, to Ranking Member Morelli. Today, I am so grateful to have the opportunity to rise and offer this bipartisan legislation, H.R. 250, the Benjamin Franklin Statue Placement Act. It is so very important to highlight moments when we do come together here in this body, and this bipartisan, bicameral legislation is a bright moment of that kind of unity. I'm really grateful for the support and partnership of my colleagues in this effort, Representative Fitzpatrick, Senators Kuntz and Bozeman on the other side of the Capitol. The Benjamin Franklin Statue Placement Act does seek to honor Benjamin Franklin, as mentioned, a renowned author, inventor, statesman, and dare I offer, the most important founding father of our great nation. Mr. Franklin's accomplishments and inventions are numerous and infamous. Electricity and bifocals and the lightning rod are just a couple of examples that every day, still centuries later, are in our lives. He's known, as mentioned earlier, for very pithy and very profound statements and witty statements such as "a stitch in time saves 9," or "a penny saved is a penny earned," and most memorably, perhaps, is "it's a republic if you can keep it." But arguably, Mr. Franklin's most important accolade is he is the only person to have signed formally all three foundational documents separating our new nation from the British monarchy: the Treaty of Paris, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, together known as the Charters of Freedom, boast the signature of some of our nation's most revered figures. Mr. Franklin's signature is the only one that appears on all three documents, however, and that's not something just worthy of note, but something, of course, to celebrate. Which is why I was shocked when I learned on my very first official tour of the Capitol building, which was given to me by my own team member, Emma Console, who is the one who really we should thank for this legislation, that there are no statues on the Capitol tour of Mr. Franklin. And indeed, the lone Mr. Franklin statue sits at the base of a stairwell, a dark stairwell just off the Senate floor, out of sight of the hundreds of thousands of people who visit the Capitol. As we've approached this nation's 250th anniversary, it really is of the utmost importance to have Mr. Franklin rightly on display and immortalized for his contributions to our foundation. So the Ben Franklin Statue Placement Act will do just that. And while Representative Fitzpatrick and I are immensely proud of Pennsylvania's own Ben Franklin, we know that this is not just for Pennsylvania, but for our entire country. I am very grateful to the 77 members who shared this sentiment last Congress, and to our 22 evenly bipartisan originally co-sponsors, and to the 33 members already who have sponsored it today. I am also very, very grateful for the leadership of Chairman Stile and Ranking Member Morelli, who supported this bill and believed in it as it passed through the House Administration Committee unanimously in September. This Placement Act, as written, directs the Joint Committee on the Library to procure and to place a statue of Mr. Franklin along the Capitol tour route, as mentioned before 2026 ends, in celebration of our 250th anniversary. And the installation of this statue in the Capitol building will not only be an apt celebration for such an important figure in our history, but it is something that I will urge our colleagues to make sure that we vote in favor of today so we can start that clock ticking. It's important that we take up this legislation now so that this awesome statue that's already built and already been donated can be cast to perfection and placed ahead of 2026. I thank you in advance for supporting this effort. I thank the sculptor Zenas Ferdakis for his beautiful work already, and I appreciate so much the hard work that has gone into this from all of the people who stand around me for being able to get this to the floor for consideration. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think people have spoken here. This is an idea whose time has more than come, and I think this is the appropriate way, and particularly, as Ms. Houlihan says, in recognition of our 250th anniversary upcoming, this would be the appropriate way to honor one of our truly great founding members of the American Revolution in our country. So with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
I just would like to say once again, I thank my colleague, the Representative Houlihan, Representative Fitzpatrick, in my long working relationship with the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for being able to bring this to the floor, correctly noted as we approach the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. I think it's true and important that we put this statue here in the United States Capitol. No further speakers. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 250, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 250? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 469, the Semiquincentennial Congressional Time Capsule Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 469, a bill to provide for the creation of a Congressional Time Capsule in commemoration of the Semiquincentennial of the United States and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Morelli, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include additional material in the bill.
Without objection,
Madam Speaker, I yield myself so much time as I may consume.
the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 469, the Semiquincentennial Congressional Time Capsule Act. This nonpartisan legislation would authorize a time capsule to be buried on the Capitol grounds to mark the nation's semi-quincentennial. America's turning 250 on July 4, 2026. This time capsule presents one way that Congress will participate in the nation's year-long celebration of democracy and freedom. Amongst our toughest challenges of the day, this legislation reminds us that we can all work together. The contents of the capsule will be selected by the Speaker of the House, House Minority Leader, and the majority and minority leaders in the United States Senate. Maybe we can even ask Speaker Johnson to include a pair of his glasses. The capsule will remain sealed until July 2nd, 2276, the nation's 500th anniversary. Rep. Bonnie Watson Coleman from New Jersey introduced H.R. 469 is a member of the United States Semiquincentennial Commission with an additional 54 co-sponsors. The architect of the Capitol provided technical input to the Commission and would work with the Congressional leadership to implement the capsule. I'm pleased to have worked with Ranking Member Morelli on this effort. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of H.R. 469, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume, and I want to begin again by thanking my friend and colleague, the chair of the Committee on House Administration, Chairman Stile, for his leadership, his friendship, and for helping us get this bill to the floor. And I do rise today in support of H.R. 469. This bipartisan legislation would authorize the architect of the Capitol to bury a time capsule commemorating the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 2026, to be opened on our nation's 500th anniversary in the year 2276. As my colleague and friend have indicated, the items in the capsule will be determined by bipartisan, bicameral congressional leaders and include written materials relating to the anniversary, representations of notable legislative and institutional milestones, and a message from this Congress to future colleagues in the 244th Congress. Seems remarkable. The upcoming anniversary marks a powerful testament to the resilience of the American experiment. Our nation has faced countless tests to our strength and unity, including a civil war, 2 world wars, natural disasters, and more. Yet, through each challenge, this country has stood and remains committed to fulfilling the ideals set forth in the Declaration of Independence 250 years ago. As we navigate a time of deep division, partisanship, and growing threats to the values that sustain our democracy, this anniversary serves as a reminder to our shared responsibility to uphold the values of liberty and equality championed by our founders. I want to extend my thanks to the Semiquincentennial Commission for its leadership in planning for this momentous occasion, and I particularly want to commend my friend and colleague, Congresswoman Watson Coleman, for her introduction of this measure. I also want to acknowledge the service of a fellow New Yorker, former Representative Joe Crowley, who has lent his time and talents to the work of the Commission as well. I look forward to seeing the items chosen for the time capsule, commend my colleagues to recommend that they support this measure. And I will note, last year on the floor when we passed the bill in the House, I committed to being here when the capsule was opened. So I hope we pass this year, because I'm not getting any younger, so this is going to be hard to hold on that long. But I'm committed to doing it, Mr. Speaker. I encourage my colleagues to support the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. From New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do want to yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman, who has had the leadership to bring this bill to the floor and would like to speak on the measure.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to our chairman. Excuse me. Mr. Speaker, the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776 was an essential milestone in the progress of all humanity towards a more fair, just, and democratic society, work that continues to this day. As we reflect upon the last 250 years of progress towards these ideals, we must impart the lessons that we've learned to future generations. As a co-founder and co-chair of the America 250 Caucus, along with my co-chairs, Mr. Evans, Mr. Adderholt, and Ms. Salazar, it is an honor to see this legislation come forward today as just one small part of our nation's 250th anniversary celebration. This bill will authorize, as we have heard, the architect of the Capitol to create a time capsule and have it buried on the West Lawn to remain sealed until July 4th, 2276, the nation's 500th anniversary. The contents will include items that represent important legislation and institutional milestones of Congress, a message from the 119th Congress to the 244th Congress, and other items that reflect our history. No one here today will see it opened, but an old Greek proverb says, "A society grows great when the old plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in." The body does its best work when we don't seek fame or followers, renown or retweets, but rather when we work so that distant generations of Americans for whom our names will be mere footnotes will enjoy the fruits of our work here today. This bill passed last Congress, and I certainly look forward to its passage again today. I am honored to be able to speak to this piece of legislation today. I thank you. I encourage all of our colleagues to support it, and I yield back my time.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
I reserve, and I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am delighted we're able to pass both these bills, hopefully unanimously. I think that shows our work together on this committee on two important pieces of really remembering our legacy and our history. Hopefully this helps us keep that in mind as we continue to navigate these difficult waters, and hopefully to our posterity that they'll remember these moments of people coming together to honor our founders and to honor our future. With that, I encourage all my colleagues to vote in favor of this legislation, and I yield back my time.
Yields. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. I thank my colleague from New York, the ranking member of the Committee on House Administration, for his work. He correctly noted we're in challenging times as we face difficult national issues, but as we reflect back, in 2 years, we'll have a celebration of 250 years of the greatest country in the world. And this time capsule, when viewed 250 years from now in 2276, may be a reflection that the midpoint then, which will be today, we navigated these challenges that we face with great courage and great vigor. And so I appreciate my colleagues' work and support on both pieces of legislation today, and I encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of H.R. 469. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 469? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 695, the Medal of Honor Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 695, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to increase the rate of the special pension payable to Medal of Honor recipients and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. McGarvey, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 695 as amended.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 695, offered by my colleague, Representative Nels. This bill would increase the rate of special monthly pension for Medal of Honor recipients and their surviving spouses. The Medal of Honor is our nation's highest military award. It is reserved for service members who have demonstrated extraordinary bravery and self-sacrifice in combat. The Medal of Honor special pension is intended to repay part of the debt our nation owes them. The Medal of Honor pension is separate from the compensation that a veteran receives when they are unable to work due to service-related disabilities. Today, there are just 63 Medal of Honor recipients who currently receive less than $2,000 in special pension per month. Their stories of service, without question, should be honored and remembered and told. However, the current pension offered does not cover the cost of travel to speak at events that inspire future generations and tell their fellow Americans about their service in defense of our freedom. It's time we increase the Medal of Honor recipients' pension in recognition of their heroic military service and their continued service to our nation. The bill is fully offset by using a bipartisan offset related to older veterans and pensions, and I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 695 as amended. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to express my support for H.R. 695, the Medal of Honor Act. To join the armed services in an act of profound selflessness. On the Veterans Affairs Committee, we recognize the sacrifice and service of every service member who, in the face of uncertainty and danger, took the oath and chose to commit themselves to a higher purpose. While every individual service member makes sacrifices and dedicates themselves to this path of honor, there are a select few who distinguish themselves from the rest. You cannot win the Medal of Honor. It must be earned through extreme selflessness and bravery. We recognize this distinguished service with our nation's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor. From the first awardee to the most recent, Medal of Honor recipients have demonstrated their unwavering commitment to serve above and beyond the call of duty, even to their own death. 43 Kentuckians have been awarded the Medal of Honor. I'll just tell you about one. Sergeant John C. Squires, a Louisville native who went from Male High School to the United States Army and served in Italy in World War II. It was in April of 1944 in the Italian countryside that Squires braved automatic gunfire, artillery, mortar fire to carry messages through barbed wire over minefields, to organize troops, to bring reinforcements to the front line. With total disregard for his own well-being, he fought German soldiers day and night. He was killed in action. He lies in rest at Zachary Taylor National Cemetery in Louisville, and a bronze statue of Squires sits atop the Kentucky Medal of Honor Memorial. Squires is one of just 3,538 Medal of Honor recipients in our history. From all who've been awarded, for all of those who earn this honor, they do so through the acts of service that are incredible. There is no paycheck that could repay their sacrifice and no thank you letters that could truly convey our nation's gratitude. We cannot ever hope to repay this debt, but we can show our fullest support for them and their surviving spouses and families by increasing their annual compensation. The Medal Act ensures that service members and their surviving spouses get an increased pension for their sacrifice, an increase that properly reflects the gravity of their service. Currently, the payment of $1,619.34 a month is deeply inadequate. Medal of Honor recipients go above and beyond the call of duty. It is only right that we honor their sacrifice with compensation that truly reflects their extraordinary actions. These heroes continue to serve, speaking throughout the country and inspiring our citizens in schools and beyond. They continue to carry the mantle of courage, sacrifice, patriotism, citizenship, integrity, and commitment here at home. There's nothing we can pay them, nothing, that will ever match their sacrifice. But voting for this act is a step toward recognizing their service, their courage, and their enduring legacy. It's about showing them, not just with words, but with action, that they are seen, they are valued, and they will never, ever be forgotten. Mr. Speaker, I support H.R. 695. I urge my colleagues to do the same, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now recognize the chief sponsor of this legislation, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Nels.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
For as much time as he may consume.
Oh, about 3 hours. Thank you to my distinguished colleague, Chairman Boss, for yielding. Mr. Chairman, first and foremost, it has been a sincere pleasure to work with you and your staff to advance this important legislation to the House floor. It is an honor. It's an honor to stand with you today. I also want to extend my gratitude to my colleague, Mr. Pappas. Thank you for co-leading this bipartisan legislation with me for the last 2 Congresses. Mr. Speaker, today I rise in strong support of H.R. 695, the Medal of Honor Act. Folks, the Medal of Honor is our nation's highest and most prestigious military decoration that can be awarded. Under current law, the President may award a Medal of Honor to a member of the armed forces who has, and I'll quote, distinguished himself conspicuously by gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Number 1, while engaged in an action against an enemy of the United States. Number 2, while engaged in military operations involving conflict with an opposing foreign force. Or 3, while serving with friendly foreign forces engaged in an armed conflict against an opposing armed force in which the United States is not a belligerent party. Since the Medal of Honor was established by Congress in 1862, it has been awarded 3,528 times. Today, as the chairman stated, there are only 63 living Medal of Honor recipients. And throughout my time in Congress, I've had the privilege of getting to know some of these heroes and hearing their stories firsthand. And in my humble opinion, these heroes are our nation's most sacred treasures, and it is our obligation as Congress to do everything in our capacity to support them and their families. Currently, each Medal of Honor recipient receives a special pension that totals roughly $1,500 per month or $18,000 annually. The last update to the special pension for Medal of Honor recipients was back in 2002 when Congress passed the Medal of Honor Pension Act. This legislation increased the Medal of Honor recipients' special pension from $600 per month to $1,000 per month. However, since 2002, over 20 years, the Medal of Honor special pension has not been updated by Congress, and it is long overdue that Congress acts. My legislation would raise the Medal of Honor special pension to roughly $5,600 per month or $67,500 annually and is fully offset. When I hear stories about how a Medal of Honor recipient's family requested to set up a GoFundMe to pay for surgery and extensive care, or how Medal of Honor recipients are not being reimbursed for travel expenses to speak at several military recruiting events, I knew something had to be done. Our Medal of Honor heroes deserve better, which is exactly why this critical legislation is needed. While this bill is a small step forward, it is the very least that Congress can do to recognize and show support for these selfless, courageous heroes. I urge all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support our Medal of Honor recipients by passing this bipartisan legislation. And with that, I reserve the balance.
Gentleman reserved.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield to my good friend who's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, House Veterans Affairs Committee, as much time as he might consume. The gentleman from New Hampshire, Mr. Pappas.
Gentleman is recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my friend from Kentucky for yielding, and I rise today in strong support of the Medal of Honor Act. The Medal of Honor is our nation's highest military decoration, and it recognizes the extraordinary valor that distinguished men and women of our military demonstrated in critical moments during their service to our great nation. There are 63 living Medal of Honor recipients, including heroes like Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Pitts of New Hampshire, who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. During his second deployment, hundreds of insurgents attacked the Army base where he was stationed. And Sergeant Pitts, who was badly wounded by a grenade but continued to fight with a tourniquet on his leg, single-handedly held his outpost for 2 hours. That battle is now known as the Battle of Wanat, one of the bloodiest battles of the war in Afghanistan. And thanks to the bravery of Sergeant Pitts, Americans were able to turn the tide in that battle and hold their position, leading Taliban fighters to withdraw from the area. As ranking member of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee of the Veterans Affairs Committee, I'm focused with my colleagues on how we can make good on our promises to our veterans and be worthy of their sacrifice. It's our responsibility as Americans to ensure that all of our service members, veterans, and their families have the support that they earned and deserve. One way we can do that is by ensuring that veterans are financially secure when their military service is over. Medal of Honor awardees receive a monthly pension that has not been raised in 23 years. So it's well past the time to do the right thing and increase the pension for these distinguished American warriors. This bill ensures their extraordinary acts of bravery are not forgotten and that their sacrifices are valued by a grateful nation. I've been really glad to partner with Congressman Nails on this bill and introduce this legislation and get it to the floor today. I want to thank him for his determined leadership on this issue and hope that we can get all of our colleagues on board later today with a strong vote in passing this legislation over to the Senate and seeing it signed into law. This is the right thing to do by our veterans and by our Medal of Honor recipients. And I urge all my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Reserve the balance of our time.
Gentleman recognized.
We have no more speakers and we're ready to close.
Okay. Gentleman from Illinois reserves. Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask my colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 695, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I encourage all members to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Okay. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 695 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules suspended.
I request the yeas and nays.
Gentleman requests the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number have risen. The yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, this is a 15-minute vote on the motion to suspend the rules. Will be followed by a 5-minute vote on passage of the House Joint Resolution 35. This is a 15-minute vote.